I have a list of questions, and I guess the first question I'd like to ask, but I would be probably more geared towards Morgan and Darwin, but certainly any of these questions are open to any of the panelists. But I guess sort of the most basic question we can ask here is really, how do we define a farmer? We're saying, you know, we need 10,000 farmers in 10 years, we need 400,000 farmers to feed Northeast Ohio. Are we talking about, you know, folks at a micro scale growing in their backyard? Are we talking about 100-acre farms? I mean, certainly the USDA definition of small farm to us seems very large. So in terms of the diversity and the size of the farms, what do we really need to understand as the definition of a farmer moving forward to sort of make sense of these numbers?
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. When we first started talking about urban agriculture in the context of some of the city and county planning departments to look at zoning, one of the first things that the planner said was we need to define terms. What's a community garden? What's a market garden? What's an urban farm? What is urban agriculture? And I found out later planners like to define things, and that's really cool. But I think it taught us to kind of figure out how do we begin to develop a vocabulary that kind of shapes this debate and shapes this initiative. And having worked with urban farmers in Cleveland the last few years, I guess my distinction would be that farming is when your motivation is profit and you want to sell the products that you're producing. Now, you could only sell $500 worth that entire season, but if you're profit driven to sell your product, I call that a farm. So you can have 1,000 square feet, I will call you a farmer. And so I think, and I guess I define it in very broad terms, from that backyard market farmer all the way up to, as Peter was saying, kind of the definition of family farms, which look more like 50 acres, 100 acres. I think all of those individuals have a role to play in the local food economy and can have an impact. So I would define it very broadly, but kind of the motivation, where are you coming from, why are you growing the food that you're growing?
Well, I think I agree with almost everything that Morgan said. You know, the other thing we should say is that there's no one definition that we're all going to be all that comfortable with, and there's no official definition that's going to come out of tonight or anywhere else. But it is helpful, I think, to think about these terms and what they mean for a variety of reasons. And they meant different things to different people. You know, you look at the term farmer, and that's related to that thing that most farmers have, a farm, you know. And you look at people discussing whether they're farm owners or farm managers or farm workers or farm apprentices and so on. Well, it could be all of those things. The farm, as the USDA defines it, and after all, the USDA has got a lot to say that affects a lot of us, so their definition does matter. Their definition of what a farm is that they've used in every agricultural census from 1850. It's changed 9 times, including this last census. And today, they define a farm as any place that produces and markets $1,000 worth of agricultural products. Or they could have. Well, there are folks that think that's not really quite adequate. You know, I was reading one woman that had a nice discussion of this a couple months ago, and she said, well, I've got 4 hens. I live in the suburbs, and I got 4 hens. And I sell some to my neighbors once in a while, and at the going rate, that would give me about $500 if I sold most of them. So if I get 8 hens, that means I qualify as a farm. Am I really a farm? Well, she doesn't think that's a very good definition. Or you go to the other end, a big stockyard with 60,000 cattle that stand in their own poop and eat feed that was grown on farms 50, 60, 100 miles away or more. Is that a farm? Most of us don't think so. Most of us think it's somewhere in between. Most of us think it's something more like what Morgan was talking about. This other woman, Lisa Hamilton, put forth a recommendation that was, when you're producing and selling agricultural products at a scale that's commercial. And she has some other attachments to it too. But I think that's a significant thing, to get beyond just growing for home use, to get beyond that and be seriously growing something for a commercial operation. Now, to address the question of how many people and what kind, it seems to me that we're going to have hundreds and hundreds of different models, and people growing at $1,000 and $2,000 per year, and $50,000 and $500,000. So it's going to be all of those things in between, and that's fine. But it's very different than the model that most of us have thought about, the people, the leaders of agribusiness have thought about. So we're looking toward a different future, and it's going to have a lot more numbers.
So that's good. I mean, I think it is a complex issue, but I guess my takeaway from that is, if we're really going to do this, the only way we can make that 30 million number not seem so staggering is if we're really comfortable saying that no farm is too small. And maybe we're not going to feed the world with our backyard, but I think the key there is not being afraid of identifying yourself as a farmer. And I think that the more people that we can have identifying with that, growing food for people other than themselves, the better the direction that we're going to